Okay, I think we're all here. So, good evening and welcome to Here Social Virtuosity with, shall I say it? Yeah. The Queen Mother of Free Improvisation. That was written in a review this week, and we've been laughing about it. So the Queen Mother of Free Improvisation, Maggie Nicols.
I didn't want to say the old granny.
With Maureen Wolloshin. And Patternbook, which is a quartet with Maureen on oboe and cor anglais, with Nadia Tewfik-Bailey on violin, with Heledd Francis-Wright, I practiced it, on flutes, and Francis Knight on piano and accordion. So and I'm Emmanuelle Waeckerlé, so I'll be there too. So I'll give you a bit of background, maybe about the series and what we're trying to do this year with this concert and with the one before. So this is actually the second of 3 concerts at IKLECTIK on the theme of social virtuosity, which is our themes for this 5th season of the Here concert series, a project which is supported by University for the Creative Arts and IKLECTIK with Isa, Edward and all the teams. So for 5 seasons we've been here and it's a real pleasure. So it's a collaboration with Harry Worley as well, one of my colleagues, where we bring into dialogue our practice research to one of our PhD students, 3 of them are here, I think, and in contact with UK musicians and composers and also some guests from abroad and from here. So the 3 pioneers of social virtuosity. Last month we had Eva Maria Huben from Germany, a composer who was with her UK friends. And the last concert of this series will be next month with Eddie Prévost and the London Improvisation Workshop. So tonight's concert, to go back to tonight's, it has evolved from conversation I have had with Maureen around her PhD research, a conversation she has had with Maggie also around her research and her attempts at feministing free improvisation. And it also evolved from Maureen's close connection to the Free Range Orchestra in Canterbury. She's really involved with it, and that's how she met as well the other members of Patternbooks. So that's the kind of the background. And it's Maureen who introduced me also to this fabulous term of social virtuosity that Maggie coined or used in the 1970s when she was co-founder and founder and part of the FIG, the Feminist Improvising Group. So she used that term at the time against a certain kind of instrumental elitism. We'll talk more about it later, maybe, because I don't want to. But for me, that term, really resonated really well in terms of everything I'm interested in, but also the world we live in for different reasons. And today we can still see that in free improvisation, instrumental virtuosity is still pretty much, preferred over the socio-political kind of dimensions involved in a musical encounter like tonight. So everything that happens between composers, players, the audience, the people around us, curators, funders, and especially also, I think it's even more important to consider that because of this crazy world we live in, not just because it's raining and the weather is crazy, but the fast and chaotic world we live in with this ruthless addiction to perfection, to success, to power, to money, and I had many more, but we don't have much time. So in a way, free improvisation and the pursuit of social virtuosity then in the 70s and now, they address these complex dynamics through music making. perhaps as forms of creative resistance. That's how I like to see them. Yeah. Creative resistance against the destructive dynamics of the system we live in. So social virtuosity in the 70s was a form of creative resistance, perhaps, against the patriarchal construct of society and of music, even in free improvisation at the time. But today, in the 21st century, as women, we have reclaimed a bit of agency and a bit of visibility, perhaps, but I think all of us, men and women, we need to resist against the kind of what I call the self-centered individualism, which is imposed on all of us, whether we want it or not. And again, to what musician and theorist Martin, maybe some of you may know it, I was introduced to his work recently, last week, by Cecilia, who was here, and he calls it social dissonance, the alienation which is caused by the discrepancy between what we think and how we have to act. How we think we're acting and what we have to do in order to survive. So that's all I will say about the context, but I think it's important to say so. It gives a context and a purpose for being all of us here together and the choices we made to be here. And all the works chosen tonight through conversations between all of us explore various ways of doing this, of feministing free and structured improvisation, seeking meaningful form of togetherness, of individual versus collective agency, and sonic intimacy of a kind. So in the first half of the concert, we will have three works, three text scores for structured improvisation. The first one, called A, by Maureen Wolloshin from 2021. So it's a text score for soloists and others. It's inspired by and resisting against the role of the orchestral oboist, who must attain, then sustain a pure A before the orchestra joins her. So that piece is about trying to resist against that and find other way of doing that. And for that piece, you're all welcome to join. In turn, solos and duos will find that kind of note, maybe not pure, but the note they are seeking, and then after that all of us can help them in the way we want. Then we have Spider Ballet by Francis Knight. It's an improvisational tango inspired by Emily Dickinson's poem, The Spider Holds a Silver Ball. And then we'll have a piece called What is Left If We Are Not the World, one of my work, which was inspired by lockdown experience and our attempt to reconcile what I call the what someone I read at the time, Franco Berardi, called the swirling flows of our surroundings with our own internal rhythm of interpretation. And the work was inspired by some reading I was doing during lockdown of Lucy Regaray and Berardi. So that's the first half, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll have a second half with some two pieces and a discussion at the end when we can all join in. Thank you.
The spider holds a silver ball in unperceived hands, and dancing softly to himself, his yarn of pearl unwinds. Softly dancing to himself, his yellow pearl unwinds.
It's already over.
Just the first
Well,
set.
the first half. So we'll take a 10-15 minutes break, and there's a bar outside, and then we'll start again.
So,
Okay, welcome back to the second half, and which is going to be about free improvisation, and then at the end we'll have a conversation as well. But Maggie, you want to say?
yeah. So the first, there's the first thing we're going to do is a little piece of mine. It's just a springboard to improvisation. It's called Sketches. It's a bit like, you know, when you go to an art gallery and you see one of the painters and you see they've done lots of little sketches and then they've done the big painting. Well, this is this equivalent in sound. It's about shared silences and reclaiming silence as a place of potentiality and thrill rather than being shut up and being silenced. And it's just, yeah, that's what it is really. And it'll evolve into a free improvisation, and then when that finishes, then we will do an actual completely free improvisation. Yes. Bloody hell, improvisers improvising. Whatever next? Yeah. Okay. Mi gyrra na vakon losta te gabalia na masha. Oh God, na vakon. Madrach no stiach na ma. Brdaki a brdаш. Ga melakator na vashi. Che caliana ma roggio na ma. to be doing, isn't it? You're going to talk now, aren't you?
You're going to talk. Queen Mother. And no, well, that's when we, yes, open up. I can just say, you know, I think we go back to why we're all here. Why are we all here? That's a good, or remembering, you know, what we have to, what the choices we make to be here. All of us, all of you there, all of us here. And talking about social virtuosity. Actually, since... No, Lisa.
And where would we be
without Lisa and Edouard?
Yes.
And Marianne and Zoe. Social virtuosity, you know, you might have just used it in passing. That's what I heard.
What happened, it was an interview, and it was Julie Dawn-Smith, who's a Canadian writer, and she was interviewing, she wanted to find out about Feminist Improvising Group. She was interviewing us all, and it just came out, you know how these things come out in the spur of the moment. I was struggling to sort of find, because thinking rather than, you know, because we used to get criticised Fig all the time. I mean, we had women like Irena Schweitzer, who is a dynamite individual virtuosic player, but it was what we were as a sum total of our varied experiences, and that lived experience is just as important as technique. Now, I think for me, if you have the opportunity to practice, that's a privilege. It's a joy. It shouldn't be something that's used as a sort of barrier to music. So in the spur of the moment, I said, well, it's more like a sort of social virtuosity, and it just came out. Basically, and then people seized on it. And it is something, that for me is very important. It is, you know, that each individual is unique, but it's together. It's the sum total of those different diverse experiences that we all brought and continue to bring. You know, and that for me is really important. Variability, excellence. Because I've even theatre, for example, I remember going to see this community production of theatre. I was in the audience, and it was stunning. It's one of the most stunning things I'd ever seen, and it wasn't professional actors. You know, so there's this assumption. It's not that I'm against individual virtuosity. I can, like anybody else, I can sit there and go, you know, somebody's phenomenal, but when that dominates as that's what music is, that's what I find alienating. It's one colour, it's one possibility, but there's so many diverse ways of creating magic, and that for me, I suppose, is where that term came from. And Farah has since talked, Farah inspired by that, sort of calls it collective virtuosity, and I think that's a similar thing. It's just, it is that thing of what we are together. And
yes, that's Farah Dina. And who started
Noisy Women.
Yeah. It's interesting because since last concert on social virtuosity, then I thought, well, I have an issue with that word social. And I said how it relates to social media and how we have so much to negotiate, you know, social between the private and the public. So collective virtuosity is a better one.
I think
because
it is, yes.
It's not about individualism. It becomes about how we kind of be both individual and negotiate the collective. The collective in all its difference.
Yes.
Because when we talk about community and collective, you know, there's almost that assumption that it's all about groups. You know, it's about identity. So it's about gender. It's about race. It's about sexuality. And you identify with a group which is the same than you. But that's the cause of all trouble. So if you think of collective virtuosity, but that embraces difference. Yeah, it's not about identity, who we are, whether we are amateur in terms of music or professionals, or whether we like jazz or heavy metal or beatboxing was mentioned earlier as well. It is about the collective.
I think that's the problem with any term. It's a bit like what's happened to woke, isn't it? Somebody said woke and it meant something very specific, and then it became fixed, and now it is the most divisive word You know, and I think that's
It's
the
used
problem.
as a cudgel now, isn't
Yeah,
it?
you know, it's the same with social virtuosity. It meant something when I said it, and I think that's a problem. Sometimes we get attached to certain things that are in the moment. They mean something in the moment, and then they mean that's, you know. And I get ever so upset because, you know, if you mean awake and aware, say awake and aware. And I think apparently it came from, I was reading somewhere, it came from somebody saying about the civil rights movement, stay woke, stay woke. And that is that's very different from this, what it's come to me now as if it's some moralistic, taking the moral high ground and you're bad, and, you know, and that's what it's come to mean. And so I think that's the trouble with language. It's why I like improvisation in a way, because it's constantly reinventing itself, and it's not fixed. And I think that's, language can be, you know, I think it's great in its context.
Do you think it was, I mean, it was relevant at the time, but
Yeah.
I look at when it was said, and the stick that you got, you know.
Oh God, yeah.
God, the stick that you got. And I hope that now, sitting here now, music has moved on, improvisers have moved on, and
Yes.
we've got a language which is more developed than it was at the time, because
Yes.
at the time, those guys who were coming at this as technically and intellectually virtuosic, if you like,
Yeah.
that was all that music in this country knew
Yeah.
at that time. It was all that we knew. And it took somebody like you to say that and go, no, and take the stick, you know, you took the stick for everybody, for music to move the language forward. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, we were really radical. In a way, Fig was quite punk in a way. We were the punks of improvised music, because we were really irreverent, and we just went in and we just upset the apple cart. And we didn't intend to. The thing is, we actually called ourselves the Women's Improvising Group, and it was a music for socialism gig. And when we got the leaflets, they called us Feminist Improvising Group. We went, oh, all right then. You want to, whoa, okay. And then we really went for it. But we were just, you know, it was more just when I went to the previous Women's Music for Socialism, I only saw one woman, and it was a singer, a wonderful singer, but there was no women playing instruments. I came from an era before the women's liberation movement, because I didn't know anything about classical music. Well, I honestly thought that women couldn't play instruments. That's how brainwashed I was. I honestly thought we weren't biologically capable of it. I know that's insane, isn't it? But I mean, that's what I thought, because you didn't see any. So, you know, so it was quite, so that whole thing, so meeting other women, and so Fig for me was like an oasis. It was like, wow, it was so empowering and so brilliant. And we were fearless to begin with. We just went, and then of course, as you say, we got attacked. We got seriously attacked. There's one horrible thing about trumpeter Corinne Lionceau, who was actually a violin player. Then she lost the use of her arm, and she went into rehab, and she taught herself, well, she realised when she was in there how amazing everybody was, community-wise. And then when she was in the women's movement and Jam Today needed a trumpet player, and she said, oh, I'll play the trumpet. And she learned, so she also she suffered, you know, she had the sort of the prejudice about disability, and also she suffered racism as a black woman. And so we had this whole thing where there was this thing, it was translated into English eventually, a wonderful book about Irene Schweitzer, about her life. But there was a whole thing of the total music meeting where all these male musicians, these women can't play their instruments, and they really picked on Corinne. And I think it was those sort of things that made me furious. Yeah. Because Corinne was so inventive, she was brilliant, and she had, you know, she made that choice to play in a completely different way, and she was a brilliant improviser, and it was things like that that made me really think, this is not about, you know, showing off individually. It really is about it's about group interplay. That's what's important.
Yeah. It's like like a conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like just be polite. You know, it's like just be polite. Listen nicely. It's like, it's not difficult. But then, the elitism is around, well, in order to do it, you've got to be able to play this instrument. It's like, no, you've got to be able to listen nicely, take turns, and support. that's kind of what you do.
I mean, we were quite slapstick as well. Sometimes we were quite crude and vulgar, but we also played amazing music as well. But yes, we did lots of role play and pretended to be men and did all sorts of, And then when somebody that time, I won't say who it was now because, but who said, we really complained to the organisers of the Total Music meeting. Why did we ask these women? They can't play and all this stuff. And we were doing a women's festival there another time, and me and Lindsay went with the gents' toilet and with his name did all this graffiti and watch out, we've got our scissors ready. Those are in those days when I'm sorry blokes. I mean, I don't think we really meant it. I think some women might have meant it, but it was insane. That was in the heyday. Because it was just so incredible. You think about something like Irena Schweitzer, and Irene loved it, even though Irena had held her own with all those men, especially those white German musicians. Like Peter Brotzmann, brilliant. And there was Irena, held her own, but just loved playing with other women. Loved playing with other women, and there was something very special, about those just the way we. The intimacy. Yeah, it was a different kind of intimacy.
But I mean, then yes, you had to kind of reclaim and hold your space and fend off. So what's different now? Why is social virtuosity or collective virtuosity, if we call it that, why is it still resonating? And how?
Because
what's the difference?
It belongs. This music, I think, free improvisation, creativity is a birthright. Everybody's creative, and I think that's for me what it means. It means honouring the creativity in everybody. Not everybody will become obsessed with it and want to do it as a way of life. But that for me is an actual blessing that I'm obsessed with it. I'm so happy I'm obsessed with it. But that doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't get up. So okay, if I do a bit of practice, I think, wow, what a joy to do this practice. But I know a lot of musicians, maybe practice for them as a burden rather than a joy. So you get this sense, well, I've suffered. I've practiced for years and years. How come this person is just picking up an instrument and sounding amazing? No, I think a lot of it is that too. Rather than thinking, well, how wonderful that you've had the opportunity to practice. You've had that opportunity. So, but maybe that's what music college is like. I never went to music college, but I do hear it's quite excruciating. It's really kind of agony, apparently, from what I've heard.
In a way, we're all conditioned in some ways, even if free improvisation should be. We're more open to all that. We're still all conditioned with this kind of inner. This almost invisible thing. We still talk about beauty. Was it beautiful? Was it masterful? So there's a contradiction there. Being creative is about being creative. It's not about sounding beautifully. And
it depends what you mean by beautiful, doesn't it? Because in a sense, you three haven't spoken, have you? What do you think?
Well, we're very shy.
Sound like it earlier. I know I'd love to. Because I've only just met you two tonight, and it's just been a joy to hear you. Wonderful. I know Francis for years, but
something to say. We all met tonight, so we haven't played. Maureen and yes, but as patternbook, you four, Heledd Francis, Nadia and Maureen have played, but not for. When did you form? Not so long ago.
We've been one another for a little while, but we only got together a few months ago, a year ago, something like that.
Sometime before Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah, not long ago.
Yeah. And Maureen and Maggie have never. You've played.
We played free range.
We met a few months ago and played, but
no, we have never played together.
No, we haven't. We haven't. But I also think there's something about value in this country. If we talk about the music that we like, and it becomes part of our social thing. And I think as a musician, you unconsciously that you're providing something of value to the listener, who can go away and say, oh, I heard this thing, it's really amazing. And we all wear those things as cultural badges. And for musicians, the badge of honour has become the technique on the instrument and the amount of pain and bleeding, sometimes literally, that it took to get your technique to that point. And it's very difficult to look at that and think, in order to do this, maybe I didn't need the bleeding, maybe I didn't need the pain, you know? Maybe I could do this in a different way. But the other thing that I think happens, certainly, I think I'm not going to speak for you, but what I really like about this is that you can hear the social virtuosity. So there's never a dominance, you know?
No.
There's never a dominance. There's never a need to just accompany because there's a hero playing a solo. There's an interplay
Yes.
that I really enjoy in the listening. So when I play it, I really like the interplay, you know. And I think that's what we like to do, the four of us. I think that's how we like to play.
Yeah. Yeah, because different people inspire at different times. You know, you hear something and go, whoa, and you're drawn to that, and then it's just this beautiful sea of, you know, like texture, where you know, where everything is just emerging and entangled together, and then you'll hear one instrument coming out, and I love that. Like there's nothing, there isn't a fixed hero, as you say, leader. What do you think, Francis? So terrible. And I want you lot in there to talk about.
Sorry, my brain's just composting all these ideas. But it's lovely playing, and it's lovely not playing.
Yes.
Like you're allowed to not play. Which is great.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid by the note.
Yeah, that's a wonderful. I love that. Yeah.
Good expression.
I mean, I was going to say, going back to your point about the technique, in an ideal world, all of those hours of practice just go into the toolbox.
Yes.
So however you come to it, I mean, I did go through the music college route, but I'm really lucky in that the people that I studied with are quite open-minded within the flute world.
Lovely.
And there's a whole little side branch of quite classical players who are not that interested in rules.
Yeah.
So that really served me quite well.
That's brilliant.
But to me, it's just all, you know, if I can learn to make a new sound, then it just goes, it's just all in the bank then.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for me, my ideal is that I reach a point that I can call on those sounds when I need them, and then not too much of a struggle to create, that they sort of become part of the language.
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah. Oh yes, none of it is in vain, is it? It's yeah.
So you say I avoided or chose, I didn't like practicing as much as these guys. And it took me a while to find my calling, which is music therapy actually. So I'm used to improvising with small children and non-verbal people and not performing improvising. So this is quite new for me, playing with instrumentally virtuosic people as well as socially virtuosic people. But yeah, often I've been to gigs and thought, oh, that looks like so much fun, I'd really quite like to do that. So so my ears going hot, so embarrassed. But yes, I enjoy doing this.
But I think that's incredible, because I've done quite a lot of work as a community musician, not a music therapist, with people, citizens with learning differences. And what I find is they're some of the greatest improvisers. They're bloody brilliant improvisers. So there again is another example of how I've had some of my thrilling experiences with those groups. I mean, thrilling. So yeah, and again, it's not that all that practice, because I like to practice. I love, but the strange thing is that a lot of the things that happen to me is because I'm in an altered state. And I think they would happen whether I practiced or not. I think the practicing goes into it. It goes into a certain kind of, you know, things like intonation and all those sort of things, you know, which can be useful. But it's sort of, but something else happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think you get a muscle memory.
Yes.
Your body is doing something, but it's bypassing your consciousness.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is
Exactly.
really nice.
It's a bit like you hear stories about people whose children are trapped under cars,
and they suddenly find they lift the cars. It's that sort of thing. It's almost you go into an altered state where, and I think anybody can access that. That's why, you know, doing workshops sometimes. I remember because I grew up in a time when especially female singers were really looked down on the jazz scene. As I say, I was very young, and I was prey for quite a lot of predatory musicians, unfortunately, and I was very insecure. And then when I started singing, I was mentored, luckily, by a wonderful pianist. And then I got some self-esteem. And then for a while, I'm thinking, oh, but I'm special. And it was great, you know. I'm not like those other chick singers. And then, you know, that awful word, you know, chick singers. And then I did my very first workshop with all these voices. And it was amazing. I thought, oh, my God, everybody sounds amazing. And that was I'm really quite glad I had that experience, because I could have gone down that route of feeling very competitive because I felt like so low status, just suddenly being told, you know, all these people, oh yeah, you can do it. And that is so much in our, like you said, Maureen, so much in our culture. That thing of some people can and some people can't.
Yeah, completely.
And that's it. Rather than some people, there's room for it all, there's room for incredible virtuosity. And like I said, oh God, I love hearing somebody really skilled on an instrument. It's amazing, but not to the exclusion of everything else.
Oh, no.
That's not that is one thing. And as I say, it's something you hear, like some of the stuff I've experienced in workshops has been some of the most blissful, most beautiful, magical music I've ever experienced. Anybody else want to say something? I know you've got trains to catch, haven't you?
We're okay. We're fine. It's now. We're good. Yeah.
Really?
We're good. Yeah.
Cool. What about anybody else? You know, what about?
I have a question.
Harry.
Yeah.
I'm picking up something quite specific, and Maureen will see why. It was about the comment about the flute being unlucky that there are these open-minded flute players on the part of this community. How do you think that the various instruments in the community around those also shapes? Because you mentioned that specifically as an instrumental subculture perhaps that's happening at the moment.
Well, it's just I've become aware of it, just especially so, you know, Maureen's experience sounds, we haven't gone into it in detail, but it sounds like it was fairly traditional. And, you know, that, I mean, I was encouraged to practice, don't get me wrong, and I did do hours and hours of practice. But I think the people that you learn with, well, they just have a massive impact on the path that you go down, don't they? Whatever you're learning. And I don't know if it was the teacher that I had at university who was extremely blasé about practice, or, you know, at music college I had a teacher who was really into free improvisation at a time that I wasn't really, but he would make, I mean, one time I had done so little work, and he allowed me to spend an hour doing just improvising whistle tones. I mean,
Wow.
I mean, it was so generous, you know, and we just played together for that hour.
Oh, amazing.
It was awesome. It was really awesome. But it was the product of my total laziness that week. So it was just this sort of brilliant accident. But I suppose, I mean, I find it a bit like an algorithm in that what you're interested in will come to you based on the people that you meet and the people that you play with and that you talk to at concerts like this. Does that answer the question?
Oh, I quite like
really?
that idea of a sort of almost cosmic algorithm, a kind of
Well,
sort of energetic algorithm.
It feels like it to me.
Yeah.
Definitely with my kind of improvising life in particular.
Yeah.
It feels like I just sort of, there's something else at play. Really. That doesn't answer the question, does it? I'm sorry.
Nice answer.
Don't ask me any more questions.
I think there is an instrumental thing going on there, actually. Because when I was a kid doing like orchestras, the trombonists were always like rough, tough, you know, can have a fart kind of people.
Yeah.
And the women were all like strings and flutes, you know. And there was me playing little bass. I didn't really fit in. And your fingers bleed when you play the bass.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
Yeah.
So literally bleeding, like you said, and then plasters and all sort of methylated spirits to try and make your skin hard. But not everyone has access to lessons. And I was extremely privileged, I realise now, just to be able to get lessons because they were free at my school. You had to pass auditions, but they were free if you passed audition.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen now.
No.
So, yeah, it's who you meet that forms it. But you choose the ones you link with, actually. So if they strike a chord with you, you're more attracted to them, and you're just more likely to follow in their footsteps, I think.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, I the people that mentored me, you know, transformed my life. You know, Dennis Rose, a bebop pianist, and who I sang with in pubs, and then John Stevens, you know, who transformed my life and introduced me to free improvisation. And it's just incredible. But I served apprenticeships rather than, I didn't realise that's what I was doing at the time, but looking back, I served apprenticeships rather than went to college, but they were bloody very, very powerful apprenticeships. Really amazing.
And based on practicing.
Eh?
Based on practice, I mean based on doing it,
Yes.
rather than on academic
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. Yes, and what was interesting, it wasn't until when I started running workshops and I realised that I did what John did and what Dennis did. I actually sang, I didn't do like what you do at school where the teacher sits outside and everybody does it. I did it with them. And that's because what John used to do in the groups, and that's what you know, when you're playing, you know, and so that was quite an interesting experience for me as well. You know, I mean, now if I do a week, you know, like then I'll maybe sort of stand outside, but I quite like that thing of osmosis because I learned from actually singing with people rather than then like being a teacher and standing outside and going, oh, can you know, it was actually the immersion in their music that actually, you know, and I think that's how it used to always be actually, and then it's got more academic. And I think there's a place for academia, I must say that, mustn't it? Because otherwise I'd be rude.
So what is the place of academia?
Yeah, somewhere there.
Yeah, what is the place of academia? Yeah, explain the place of academia.
She was a quick mother.
No,
Isn't it to articulate the importance of your work for posterity, Maggie? Isn't that what it is?
So that we're not written out of history again.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean it
exactly.
has an important role in relation of being written out of history or not.
It's a shame because you know the oral tradition is so important, but obviously if things aren't written down, then it's sort of they get lost, which is a shame. I suppose. Or what you're doing, filming, I suppose, is good too.
But that's in a way, that's what we film these concerts.
Yes.
And if we go back to academia,
Yeah.
with Harry we discuss it a lot, and actually that was part of my introduction, but they are too long, is if we talk about that social dissonance. So having to negotiate another kind of social virtuosity, you know, to be able to fund, you know, with small funding, this kind of concerts, which at the same time are a critique, you know, of the institution that kind of funds us.
Yeah, oh, that's
so so again, I think it goes back to the social dynamics in a way. So it's not about being outside; it's doing things from the inside.
And thank the goddess there are people like you doing that, and like people like Raymond MacDonald,
Yes,
who
exactly.
Raymond on his course, anybody can be in it. He gets a lot of hassle from the other tutors because everybody else has to audition and be vetted, and you know. And Raymond just says anybody can be on my course, and there's an example of somebody actually being in that position. So that to me is exciting when there's people.
So in a way, in academia, or you know, I'm both outside and inside, but you have your role is that creative resistance to push against, you know, to be from the inside and finding ways. We can't do without the institutions, whether it's academia or governments, things they are there. capitalism. But what we can do is from the inside find ways of, but positive ways of resisting. It's good to go and protest, to be in the street, to do things. But that's, in a way, we get exhausted. In a way, the systems wants us to do that. Or striking in academia. We're all exhausted, losing money, and we have to do double work because then you have to catch up because you care about your students. And so I think that's in a way that social positioning you talked about with your workshop is doing it with and from the inside. Because from the outside it might be easier, but it has no impact in a way.
Oh, I wouldn't say it has no impact. It's got a different impact.
No, but not from inside or outside. I think it's from outside the system. Then.
Because I think it's important, like all the work you're doing, the music therapy, the community music.
But that's a creative resistance within.
But it's sort of not. It's not necessarily. It is. And community music, I think, is probably the most grassroots of all the sort of and there's huge amount. It has huge impact. I think and I'm thinking of groups in the 60s and the 70s. I mean, places we were talking about the Oval House, which was a most incredible sort of grassroots, a community centre. Did you know the Oval House? Amazing. And I first went there in 1970, and it was Peter Oliver and Joan Oliver, and it had been a Church of England youth club, table tennis, ping pong, so table football, ping pong, all that, just everything. And Peter gradually started bringing in fringe theatre and all these radical things, and he kept the youth, he kept the locals. It was one of those rare community centres that really was a community centre. It wasn't just plonked into a neighbourhood and nobody went from the neighbourhood, And it was phenomenal, and so many people got a start there.
They really did. They really did, because even there was me, the classical oboist, who was in the halls of residence for all the music conservatoires in London at the time, which was down the road from there.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and it was down the road from the Oval Station. Can you imagine 100 music students all practicing 10 hours a day in that area? It's extraordinary. But they used to let us practice there. So I'd have wind quintet rehearsals in that space.
Wow.
All these properly cross-cultural things going on in that space.
It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. And I will name drop now. Because I was in a Celtic rock musical that happened there with Pierce Brosnan before he got famous. He was there long before he got famous, and he criticised me for raising my eyebrows when we were doing. And then I look at him, he's raising his eyebrows. What have you done? I like men to do it, but women, you've got to keep nice, clear foreheads. But he was sacrificed. It was an incredible thing. Cockery, it was called. It was mad. It was wonderful. But there's so many productions happened there. Everything happened there, and anybody could turn up and say they wanted a room, they wanted to start a theatre group. You could just do it. There was no, can I see your qualifications, where's your NVQs or whatever. You could just turn up, and if you want, the reason I ran my first workshop was because my ex-husband Harry, he needed somewhere to rehearse a band, and he'd been told about the Oval House, and we turned up, and Peter said, yes, of course you can have a room, will you run a workshop? And Harry said, yes, and they said to me, you do it. And I said, I don't have to run a workshop. and I'd just been doing John Stevens, and I did a John Stevens piece, the sustain piece, and I remember there was this room full of men with saxophones, and maybe it might have been a trombone and a trumpet or something, and the sustain piece is this beautiful piece where you sing a note or you play a note and you just keep repeating it. It's quite hypnotic, and you really get immersed, and you keep repeating and repeating until very subtle changes happened. Well, I didn't know how to sort of be John, so I just very timidly and apologetically suggested this piece, and I think it lasted for about a second, and it was like, what the fuck's going on? I remember, and I'd forgotten what happened, and I asked Harry, my ex, and he said, well, apparently after about half an hour they ran out of steam, and I went, that was lovely. Now, I think we could do it again, and could you hold your note for a bit longer? And that was my first workshop. Now, where could you do that? only at the old, you know, that's the difference. And that's genuine.
Yes, maybe that's a good way, because if I think of eclectic as a space,
yes,
you know, that kind of allows this kind of things to
Yeah.
happen in a way.
Yeah.
That's-
We need spaces. We do desperately need these spaces.
I think we can keep on talking now over a drink, but we need to stop recording, and some people have trains,
Have
but
trains
we
to
can
catch.
stay. So I just want to thank you all, everybody,
Thank you.
and
Thank
yes,
you.
it was a wonderful evening.
Thanks for getting it together.
And yes, so thank you very much, and yes, let's keep on resisting creatively, playfully, and beautifully.
Yeah.
Thank you.